following is a Super Network production with Super Marcey.
Look, as much as I love that we don't really see images of that film, I just want to see that film.
The terrible Australian Bede, Jermyn.
If they made a romantic comedy out of The Fly, this would probably be it.
It contains coarse language.
After it was over and the credits were done, my friend just looked at me and he just said, "Dude, that was
Mature themes.
Her husband wants her need satisfied, and she had a zombie baby with him.
Potential spoilers.
Spoiler alert.
Listener discretion is advised. Please find us at supermarcey.com and subscribe to us via Patreon at patreon.com/thesupernetwork. Enjoy.
G'day everyone, this is Bede, aka The Terrible Aussie, and welcome to episode 16 of Podcasters of Horror, the podcast where my co-host Super Marcey and I talk about horror anthology film and TV shows. But at the moment, we are particularly focusing on the unofficial third season of Masters of Horror, which is Fear Itself. And with me, as always, is my lovely co-host, the one, the only, Super Marcey. Hello, Marcey, how are you?
Hello. Not too bad, Bede. Thanks for the lovely introduction. Doing all right. We're, it's the horror season now, so nothing else matters.
We're already at the start of, already probably by the time this episode is dropped, It will be about a week into October, so the horror season is already in full swing, and we've already got some good podcasts coming up in terms of horror-related entertainment for this month. And we definitely have a pretty good episode of Podcasters tonight, because we're going to be talking about two very interesting episodes from two very interesting but awesome filmmakers. But Marcey, we are not alone on this one.
No, we are not. We have a special guest.
Indeed. This is her first time on any of our podcasts.
Yeah.
But we have been on her podcast. You and I both went on one episode together, and then you went on a solo episode as well, which I'm very upset by because nobody asked me if I wanted to join.
You get to do your own
episode.
I just got to pitch an idea. But with tonight's episode, we are joined by the host of Thank God It's Friday, a horror podcast, and that, of course, is Cat. Hello, Cat. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm so excited to talk about this. This is the first time I've seen this show, so now you guys have me hooked. Thanks.
You say that now, but then you watch the two episodes that's all I need to see at the moment. I don't need to see the rest of this series.
Well, I hope it's as good as what we saw, as what I have seen.
Well, there are a few. Well, with the ones the first 4 that we talked about previously, I think maybe except one, 3 of them are probably worth watching at least.
Yeah, definitely. And also we have also talked about the first the 2-season run of Masters of Horror itself, and that is always a great show for any fan of horror to check out, especially with the concept of it being that it's horror filmmakers tackling all these episodes. Which, of course, is the same for Fear Itself, although this one was made for more primetime television rather than cable television compared to Masters. And, we're pretty much we're actually now at the halfway point, because we're talking about episodes 5 and 6, which, of course, are Eater and New Year's Day. Now, before we get to talking about these episodes, Kat, since you're on Podcasters of Horror, were you familiar with the TV show Fear Itself and Masters of Horror, or is this a show that is pretty much just all brand new to you?
Fear Itself is brand new, but I have watched some of Masters of Horror because I'm really picky. So I went in and watched all the ones with filmmakers that I really like. So I was like, I'm going to watch this one, I'm going to watch this one. So I think I only ended up watching maybe 3 or 4 episodes. But I have been meaning to circle back and finish watching them because they're on Stan now.
Yes, they are. Well, in Australia, Stan. So if our Australian listeners want to see the show, that's where they can watch it. Or if you're in the US or Canada, it is on Tubi US and Canada, so they can check it out there.
Yes, I was illegally watching episodes in the past, but then I think that was only 1 or 2 episodes, and then I was like, oh, wait a second, it's on Stan.
Yes.
I'm an idiot.
Indeed. But we'll get right to our 2 episodes that we're talking about tonight. First up, of course, is the episode Eater.
Hey, Miller. You need anything? Do you want anything?
How about a plate of liver and some eyeball risotto?
You scared the hell out of me.
There you go. Service with a smile, huh? Yeah. Is it good?
Thanks.
Special blend.
You seen Mattingly?
No, not since he came up here to watch The Prisoner, no.
Hey, you should check him out. The guy's out like a light.
So, you ever wonder why he does it?
Kill people?
And eat them. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's the eating people.
Which was directed by Stuart Gordon, who, of course, is the director behind films such as Reanimator and From Beyond, and also directed the Masters of Horror episodes, Dreams in the Witch House and The Black Cat.
Yeah.
This episode was written by Richard Chismar and my arch nemesis, Jonathan Sheck.
Yes.
I'll get into that reason why he is my arch nemesis in a second. And this episode was based on a short story by Peter Crawford. And this episode's plot summary is, which I'm reading off IMDb, nothing is what it seems when a rookie cop is assigned to watch over a serial killer known as Eater. And this episode stars Elisabeth Moss, who we all know from the TV show Mad Men and most recently in the hit horror film The Invisible Man. And of course the other TV show The Handmaid's Tale as well. Mm-hmm. And this also stars Russell Hornsby, Stephen Lee, Stephen Hart, and Pablo Schreiber, the younger brother of Liev Schreiber.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get right to this episode. Now, Marcey, I know you're a huge Stuart Gordon fan.
Yes.
How does this episode, Eater, compare to, I guess, is the 2 episodes he contributed to Masters of Horror, but also how does it work as a standalone as well?
Well, I'd say this one is on par with, what was the first one, Dreams in the Witch House?
Dreams of the Witch House.
Yeah, I think it's more on par with that. I think perhaps with the script, like, it's quite interesting itself, but I don't think there was quite enough there that it sort of felt like it was filling out a bit of the running time. So maybe if there was a little bit more in there, it could have been elevated more. But I think, at least Stuart Gordon actually tackled this pretty well. It does feel like it's Stuart Gordon-y, and I liked that about it. In terms of like, just how it is as this own little, short film, like I think it does work for the most part. It's an interesting, intriguing story, and thinking of it being fleshed out, like this is one I think that you could kind of do as a feature, and I could see that as like a Stuart Gordon feature. Obviously he's done better things, but he's done probably poorer things as well. But this sits on there like more sort of upper tier stuff, because I do think that there's a lot of merit to this episode.
Indeed. And Kat, what did you think of this episode, Eater?
I really enjoyed it. I thought that this whole concept of a, magic man, and I looked for the mythology behind this, because I was like, is there anything I can find? And there was nothing. So I thought it was a really cool concept that he conjured up this dark magician, basically. And I'm not really familiar with Stuart Gordon's work. I've only seen Reanimator and some of the stuff he's written, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So this is a really nice introduction into another filmmaker that I can definitely see myself enjoying more of their work.
Indeed. And I guess for me, I'm kind of a little mixed on it, but I do have some aspects of it that I did really enjoy. I think Elisabeth Moss,
yes,
who is great in the lead role as Danny Bannerman, who's like this rookie cop at this police station.
Yeah.
right away we're kind of on her side because basically most of the male cops who are at this precinct are very much sexist towards her, even if at times a little too cartoonish in terms of
They're
sex
pretty
towards her.
disgusting.
Yeah.
Particularly the character of Steinwitz, who's, I don't know what it is, played by Stephen Lee, and I don't know what is about this character. I guess spoilers for this episode. Pretty much at a certain point, Ida pretty much uses like a black magic to kind of what he does is he eats the heart of any person, and once he does, he can become that person, like he can shapeshift. And so basically for a lot of it, you're like, it goes back and forth. Like at times you're not sure, like, is that Ida or is these characters just being complete other asshole towards Danny? And Steinwitz in particular is a very gross character because he's always sweating and he's always eating food. But I mean, I enjoyed pizza as much as the next person, but the scene where he's eating the pizza, that pizza looked utterly disgusting.
Yeah.
And revolting. And also like Pablo Schreiber, who plays Mattingly, he's just a complete arsehole, and he plays it really well. But that's the thing that I get. But I do think it's interesting because since this whole episode is set entirely at this police precinct, it does have that sort of layer of claustrophobia to it, and it sort of makes you and also like Danny, we're not exactly sure what is going on because like the only thing we know about here is like he's a cannibal, but then as the episode progresses, we find out that he knows how to do black magic as well. So that sort of gives the episode a bit of a supernatural feel to it as well. And I guess one of the things with the episode which didn't quite honestly work for me is kind of the tone, because as we know, Stuart Gordon is a guy who does enjoy putting camp in his projects. So pretty much the combination of him and also Richard Shizmar and Jonathan Sheck, my arch nemesis, because they also wrote a pretty campy episode of Masters of Horror, The Washingtonian. So the combination of these three talents together definitely it seems like a perfect fit between making a horror film that does have elements of camp. But I think the campy elements just didn't really quite work for me. But I'm not sure how you both feel about that.
Well, I think depending on what you're going into with something by Stuart Gordon, there is a campy element to it, like a Reanimator, From Beyond. These even Castle Freak. There's definitely camp there, and Dreams in the Witch House definitely had that as well. And I know that he definitely makes it work because that's just something he adds naturally into his work when, as a director or as a writer himself, but not obviously not for this, but I'm just saying. But it is a serious story, but I think those kind of bits sort of not take away, but they just give you some breathing room for a second because you're still trying to like understand what the hell's going on. And I think, I just think at parts more than anything, they just kind of lingered on a little too long than they should have. Whereas, having a bit of camp in it wasn't something that I thought took away from it at all. Because, I think that he knows how to kind of get that in the right kind of blend with everything else.
Yeah, I the campy moments for me is like when the cop is, stuffing his face full of pizza and there's like pepperoni falling everywhere and his face is like this greasy, oily mess that, is slowly transforming because, we don't know what's happening to everybody in the police station. And then there's some moments where there's a police officer like stuffed under a desk and there's just like this horrific amount of blood everywhere. And those moments for me, I was able to have a chuckle out of because I'm just like, the campiness wasn't necessarily in what I visually saw, but was also in what I was taking away from the story about like all these men getting their comeuppance for messing with this like female cop. And so I was like, you're getting you will get yours, don't you worry, you're next. And I
Indeed.
found that funny.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I also like with Elisabeth Moss as the character of Danny. You can obviously tell that, of course, she's the outsider of this precinct, but from the very beginning, you sort of realize that what you know more about her is that she's actually a huge horror fan. So she kind of is aware of everything that is going on and makes references to everything. And even one cop gets angry at her because he makes a reference to Silence of the Lambs, and she's like, no, that's not it. That's a totally different character you're making reference to. And of course, another cop's not happy about that because it makes her look like a smartass. But, you know, she's a character who's knows her stuff, knows that there's something up, and, you know, that's what makes her a good, like a really compelling character. And of course, you know, Elisabeth Moss as an actor, you know, she brings so much to that character that just makes her very relatable. And, you know, she handles like the material really well.
Yeah. She's incredibly smart, incredibly practical. And I like that everyone else is kind of just like an NPC on the side. Like, oh, you're here, but you're not that important. Like, this is about her and her fight and journey through this film. And then, of course, Ida is also a really important element in all of this. But I love that, she's just such a great central character. And yeah, I love the conversation that you were talking about, Bede, because one of the cops says, oh, there's nothing worse than a horror movie nerd.
I'm like, what a freak.
I was like, oh, shut up. You get out of here.
Yeah, you're just inside, you're just kind of like, fuck you, man.
Like, they gave him that line, he's going to die a horrible death.
Yeah, and I think he did.
And also, Ida himself, played by Stephen E. Hart, he's definitely got a very unique look about him that I thought sort of made him quite memorable as a villain. He doesn't say much throughout the whole episode, but he has a very creepy presence about him, and I thought he did a really good job of sort of capturing that quite well in the episode.
Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting, I guess, villain of the piece, because it's quite different from stuff we've seen in Masters of Horror, kind of taking this mythical type of thing with like black magic and stuff, and, you know, kind of how it all works. And I found that really, really different and interesting. And I think with sort of that central character with being like a serial killer who, you know, is a cannibal, but you don't know much about it, and you're trying to find out about it along with the character. So she's like your vessel in a way. So I liked that. And I think it's always interesting to see earlier performances from people who are more well known now. Because I think my introduction to Elisabeth Moss that I could at least remember was Mad Men.
Although Elisabeth Moss as Mad Max, I would like to see.
Well,
I'd watch that.
Do that. But yeah, I got on, you know, if I've seen her in something before that, I honestly can't remember. But it is interesting to kind of see something, you know, that she was in earlier, and that, you know, she was really good in this, but obviously her skills have just gotten better and better because she is one of the more, I think, compelling people working. Even if she's a Scientologist, I think.
Oh, gosh.
Well, we won't hold that against her, but
That could be the disclaimer.
I mean,
of
I
the
will,
episode.
but, you know.
Don't be disappointed when you find out that Elisabeth Moss is a Scientologist. Aren't all rich people Scientologists, though? Anyway.
Pretty much. They got to spend the money somewhere.
Yeah.
I live down the
write-off.
road from the Scientology Centre here in Melbourne. It's only
Oh,
just
no
up the
way.
road. I live.
I don't live near any religious buildings. I guess where I live, it's not a religious place. Anyway.
But I got to say one more thing before I loved about this episode was the score. I thought the score, I really, like, I guess it's been a while since I've seen this episode because I hadn't seen this since it actually aired. And I was sitting there and I'm like, I really like the score because it has that sort of mixture of sort of, it's hard to describe the score because it feels very kind of something you would hear out of one of the Predator films. It's sort of like a lot of bombs, stuff like that. And it really sort of, again, I guess it kind of adds to, because the character of Ida is meant to be a Cajun. So I guess that kind of adds to that sort of aspect of his personality, but also kind of adding something that's different to the episode and not some kind of generic kind of horror score that we've heard times before.
And I think it kind of added to the atmosphere too, strangely enough.
Like it adds a bit more of a creepy atmosphere.
Mm.
Bobby Johnston was the composer of that.
Yeah, I was just having a look at his discography. There's not anything I really recognize, but he did a really great job, and I was really fascinated by the score rather than I have a tendency to get bored of scores sometimes and will just like block that bit out of my head. So if it's forgettable, I won't remember it. So I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. But this was really interesting because they incorporated a lot of different styles of music, and they had Cajun inspired like music and instrumentals as well, along with, you know, him himself playing his maraca, which I'm assuming has some kind of conjuring power along with it, you know, music summoning demons and things like that. So it was really fascinating.
Yeah, it was a pretty, I guess overall, like, even though I've kind of sort of had mixed elements with it, but I think overall it is a pretty solid little episode. I would say it's on the level of what the 2 episodes that Stuart Gordon did with on Masters of Horror, but I think for what it is, I think it's still a pretty decent one nonetheless. But Marcey, what are your final thoughts and rating for Ida?
I thought it was a pretty solid episode. I think it's definitely one of the I guess one of the better ones that we've seen so far with Fear Itself. And anything Stuart Gordon, like, yeah, fantastic. I mean, I've pretty much seen, I think, everything he's directed. This was one that I hadn't. There's still, I think, the very few, if anything, left that of his I haven't seen. So yeah, I've actually thought it was pretty solid. I think if things were fleshed out more, as I said earlier, you could make a feature out of this. And it does have that Stuart Gordon flavor and style. And yeah, like you said, like it does have some stuff in common with the Masters of Horror episode, the Washingtonians, but I think this is a lot more successful. And whether or not it's just the script was better than that or Stuart Gordon just made it work, I don't know. But I found it a pretty enjoyable episode. If not, maybe it just lagged a little bit in some places, but overall it comes together really well. The kind of twist is something you suspect, but it still kind of is shocking, especially when you start seeing the bodies, you know, start piling up. But yeah, I'd give this a 3.5. Ripped your heart out, stolen your looks for my shape shifting out of 5.
I love it.
And what about you, Kat?
I really enjoyed this episode as my introduction to the Anthology series. I really loved Reanimator, and I saw a lot of that in this film with the practical effects, the camera work, especially when we had some really cool angles of Ida himself. I saw a lot of those elements coming through in this, and obviously Stuart Gordon, duh. The script for me was a little bit like meh in a way, just because like I just wish that there was more thought put into the dialogue. You know, we're stuck in this police station. Yeah, we get it. There's sexist cops. We've got a female protagonist up against a supernatural being. I would have preferred a little bit more thoughtful dialogue. Just to fill in those parts where they were speaking, because there isn't a lot of talking throughout the film, and especially in the show, especially in the second half. I really liked that they referenced horror movies. They referenced Ed Gein at one point, so I was like, okay, they're throwing in true crime. Stuart Gordon and the writers, they know their stuff. But yeah, I give it a 3 out of go see your dentist, please 5. Because his teeth, oh my god.
Yeah, those
oh my, I am a teeth like fanatic. So seeing his teeth, I was like, oh, I think I'm traumatized.
But I guess for me, I would give it about 3 out of 5 as well. Like I said, I don't think it's perfect, and I think some of the sort of the campiness of the approach I felt was a bit uneven at times. But I do agree with you, Marcey. I think Richard Chismar and my arch nemesis Jonathan Sheck's writing on this episode probably worked better here than in Washingtonians, because I think because since Washingtonians went for that camp as well, but I don't think it kind of meshed with that episode's director Peter Maddox style, since, you know, he's more of a serious filmmaker, and probably if Stuart Gordon directed that episode, it probably would have worked a lot better. But here, I think for most part, it's still a pretty solid episode. Like I said, it's not a great episode, but it does have a pretty solid premise that you could easily expand into a longer episode or movie. And Elisabeth Moss just kicking ass and taking no names in this whole episode. And of course, I guess to make context, why is Jonathan Schaech my arch nemesis?
Yeah, I'm hanging here.
A while back, he's in a film that I consider one of the worst films of all time, Welcome to Whoop Whoop, which somehow has got a bit of a revival as a cult hit, but I don't understand why, but that's just me. So I wrote a tweet saying, like, why is everyone trying to make Welcome to Whoop Whoop into a cult classic? It's not a cult classic. And then one day I was just checking, I got a notification and I looked. It was from Jonathan Schaech himself. I didn't tag him at all in this tweet. And all he wrote was, it is.
He called you out like a boot.
He called me out.
Worst film ever.
Yes. Oh, he called me out. And of course I backtracked and said, oh yeah, maybe I'm wrong. But inside I'm like, you bastard. So he's been my arch nemesis ever since. Even though I do love that thing you do. So
Stand your ground.
Exactly. Yes, so he's been my arch nemesis ever since. And we'll be talking. Yes, but we'll be talking more about him in the future because he also wrote another episode of Fear Itself that's coming up, and as well actually has also starred in the episode as well.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
But
Can't escape him, can we?
Exactly. So I'll be talking about that my arch nemesis again then. But we'll move right along to episode 6 of Fear Itself, which of course is the episode New Year's Day.
So I'm sorry, I just really don't like dancing.
I know, it's fine.
Eddie was telling me.
Really, what did he have to say? What would he know about relationships? Has he ever been in one? Really? Huh.
And I know that it hasn't really been that long.
No, you're not that complicated.
I love you.
You do?
Look, I know Look, you say that I never take chances.
I'll be back.
Which was directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, the director of Saws 2, 3, 4, Repo the Genetic Opera, and most recently Spiral, the Book of Saw. And this episode was written by Steve Niles and Ben Sokolovsky from a screen story by Steve Niles, which in turn is also based on a short story called The Dead Time by Paul Kane. This episode stars Briana Evigan, Zulay Henao, I probably butchered her last name, so please forgive me, Niall Matter, and Cory Monteith. And definitely R.I.P. And this episode's plot summary, which I am reading off IMDb, is a young woman awakens in a post-apocalyptic world overrun by zombies. Now, that's the initial setup of this episode, but Marcey, this is your first time watching the episode.
Yes.
Tell us your thoughts on New Year's Day.
Okay, so I thought the premise was really interesting. Like, you wake up, you open a window, all shit's broken loose outside. It looks like the person might have had, a bit too much to drink. They're hungover, don't know what the hell's going on. And then slowly, things start to unravel. And then it kind of, I'm sitting here going, okay, I think I know what this twist is. And this is kind of irritating me because this character is just being absolutely fucking stupid. Look, I really like Darren Lynn Bousman. I think he's tops. And I could see like that kind of style that he sort of, the same kind of style that like James Wan used in Saw that Darren Lynn Bousman took to his Saw sequels. That kind of weird style is in this, and it reminded me of Dance the Dead from Masters of Horror, which was the Toby Hooper one, where it's a really interesting premise, but a lot of things kind of let it down. And while that one had so much like style that it became too much that it didn't work, I feel like this, it was so overdone, it wasn't really necessary. And when it gets to the end, like, yeah, I could tell what that twist was, and it didn't really impact me the way it should have. And the journey to get there, I just felt like could have been a lot more interesting than it was. Like, I like the idea that this character's kind of remembering like what happened the night before and stuff, but we as the audience, you know, when you have that one character that you follow, you're kind of meant to be in their shoes, but we already know more than she's, you know, apparently can work out. And I felt that just kind of was a bit silly, because I don't think that's how it necessarily works. Because then you're just going like, why the fuck are you doing this? This is so fucking stupid. And you can't have a character purposely make stupid decisions to go with your shocking plot twist, because it still comes off incredibly stupid. But this one was definitely a mixed bag for me. As much as I did like the premise, and I thought it did start off within the first like 5-10 minutes fairly decently.
Kat, what did you think of New Year's Day?
I really enjoyed this. Like Marcey was saying, we see a lot of, you know, Darren Bousman's stylistic choices of especially like the lights flashing, and we see like jagged images and blurred faces and whatnot. So I've seen, you know, we've seen that in Saw 2 and 3, you know, however many times we've watched it. But I really enjoyed the twist, because I am slow usually to pick up twists. And that's just because if something doesn't have subtitles, I have a really hard time of like concentrating. And so this didn't have subtitles, and I was like, no, like I'm not going to understand what's happening. And so at one point I was like, isn't she with this roommate guy? And
that confused
like,
me
aren't
as
they
well.
Together?
I was like,
She's
does she have
Cory.
a boyfriend? Does she not have a boyfriend? Who's this fucking guy? Is that her roommate?
Who's
this
the
her boyfriend?
child?
Yeah,
Who
who's
does the child belong to?
kid? That was so confusing. It wasn't just you. I was there going,
Okay, good.
fuck.
It was like, where am I? But then it was like at the halfway mark, like they let all that go. And I was like, okay, cool. So I don't have to worry about that really convoluted piece of exposition that wasn't provided for me.
It made no sense.
Like, I don't know what is this woman dating both of them? I don't know what's going on. I'm not one to judge, and I don't. But can you tell me? But I really loved the twist scene where I was like, oh my god, it all makes sense now. So like when it got to the end, like every one of her decisions, I was like,
yeah,
how did I not pick that up earlier? I really enjoyed it, and I do like Bousman's style of directing. And for me, I always enjoy like a narrative heavy, and so for me that fell a little bit short on that side. But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I guess for me, I think out of all the episodes of Fear Itself, because this is my second time watching the episode, and funnily enough, this is not the episode I'm thinking of, because I was thinking of like whether this was the last episode that actually aired on TV before it was cancelled. No, but that's another 2 episodes from now, but we'll get to that later. But for me, I guess for New Year's Day, what I think is the most interesting out of all the episodes of Fear Itself, and this is something I believe you and I have talked about, Marcey, how compared to Masters of Horror, the episodes kind of definitely feel more TV show-esque rather than more cinematic. But with New Year's Day, I could just safely say without a doubt, like you could watch this episode and be like, oh, Darren Lynn Bousman directed this episode.
Oh yeah,
like,
without a doubt, you can tell.
Like
it's him, yeah.
Yeah, like because he's worked with low budgets and stuff like that. So, and you can instantly tell within the first minute of this episode, like the same style he has brought to all the Saw films, Reaper, the Genetic Opera, all the type of films he was making at that time is in this episode. And he definitely goes much more full tilt with the style in this one. So this, for me, I guess, is an episode where it definitely is more about the style than the substance. And, because the premise itself is a pretty simple one. Girl wakes up, the zombie outbreak happens, so she goes across town to try to meet up with her boyfriend. And, like, And the episode really does delve into that style. And now that I sort of was thinking about it, I think the style definitely is like more reflective of the mindset of what our main character is going through.
I feel like that's what it represents. But I feel like it was just too overused, where I think that style works better when you're not doing it like every 2 seconds. And that was the same kind of issue I had with Dance of the Dead, where it was just relying on this particular like style, and the way it was shot, like very similar, like way too much. And there were points in this, and I think it was particularly when she was in the lift or the elevator. I don't have seizures, but I felt like I was going to have a seizure induced from those visuals, because it's just so blah, blah, blah. So, you know, if anybody who hasn't seen it or is going to rewatch it, just be warned that could trigger off something if you do have those issues. Because it is very like blah, blah, blah. But this one also has kind of like more darker themes to do with, you know, death, grief, suicide. So also, you know, a bit of a warning there. But we, you know, kind of always have to have like some kind of warnings with these ones, because you know, a few episodes we've covered have been very, very serious.
Oh yeah, definitely.
In their themes. But yeah, anyway, I'm rambling.
But yeah, I was going to also say, like, I was going to agree with you. Like, even though I think that as appropriate as that style is for putting us in the mindset of Briana Evigan's character, it does get a little too much at times, which I do agree with. But sort of the answer to your point where you were saying before, like, why is she making so many dumb decisions? Well, spoilers, she's dead, so her brain's not working at all. During
I
this
loved
part
that. I was like, oh, I'm dumb. It all makes sense. Like,
that's the thing, though, because
it's
because the first time I watched this episode, it never occurred to me like, oh, she might actually have been dead the entire time. Like when she wakes up at the beginning, it's like her turning into a zombie. But since we're seeing this from her point of view, she thinks she's still alive.
That's the bit I found really interesting, that in her head she's having all these conversations and she's venting her grievances and she's grieving losing friends throughout this whole process, and it's so fascinating because it's like, do zombies actually have, like, would they have that, like the last memories of their brain before they lose, you know, all consciousness and just, you know, become the undead? And so I was like, oh, that's so fascinating that she was still able to make these decisions in the last few hours of that day. It was, I thought it was really cool.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think also as well, like, you know, since we are seeing this from her point of view, like all the decisions that she makes, of course, being that she's a zombie, her brain's no longer working. So every kind of bad decision she makes in this episode, like what I do think is interesting, like of the episode, and this is why for like the first time I watched this episode, it took me a while to figure out, to figure out what the twist is. I just assumed, like, and this is probably a deliberate part, that all the decisions that she makes would be a mixture of panic and being overwhelmed by what's going on. But since she's just woken up after a massive night out, you could also contribute that to either her still being drunk or having a hangover. So like,
incredibly hungover.
But then watching this episode again now, knowing how the episode, like the twist is, like I can see like, that would, like none of the zombies never really interact with her, or at least they don't attack her or anything like that. And also like when she does run into human characters, they kind of tend a bit more standoffish or freak out over her and stuff like that as well.
I think what clued me in pretty quickly is that she wasn't being attacked by zombies, and she's talking to the zombies as if they weren't zombies. And I'm like, oh, she's dead. She's a zombie. But what I think actually is really interesting with the script is like what you touched on before, is that it's from her point of view, but then it kind of makes you wonder if like that zombie brain still, like, as your consciousness still thinks you're normal, but the way it's like I don't want to say normal because it's not the right word, but I think you know what I mean, where you sort of feel like, you know, okay, this is me, but then it's like these involuntary actions start to happen, and then that view of how you seeing reality starts to change. And I think that's kind of something that was interesting, to think about with the concept of this. So yeah, I mean, while I obviously had some issues with it, I still think it's a pretty solid overall film with a really interesting idea. And I felt that the performances were actually pretty solid. The housemate dude, I was like, why the fuck are you dressed like Constantine? That was just weird out the whole time.
But no, he was like kind of wearing a jacket that looked very similar to Constantine.
He kind of had that gruffy look as well.
But I also think, because I've seen pictures of Darren Bousman, and the guy, the roommate, looked exactly like Darren Bousman. It was freaking me out a little bit.
Yeah. I was just like, is that him? And I was like Googling, and I'm like, okay, no, they just look really creepily alike.
Indeed.
Also, fun fact, Briana Evigan was in one of my favorite teenage movies, Step Up to the Streets.
Oh.
The best part of the Step Up sequence. You got to step up to the streets.
To the streets.
I just really like dance movies. It's my secret shame.
This movie, episode when it was released around the time when she was big because of those movies. So, like, you explain that. And, of course, she would work with Darren Bousman again later on as well, because Darren Bousman's one of those filmmakers who likes to work with the same actors over and over again. But I also found it interesting, like, the late, great Cory Monteith being in this episode. And this was he did before being on Glee as well.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, because Glee came out.
He looked so young.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Really young.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I can't remember when Glee came to television, but
I think it came out a year after the.
I think it was a year after.
Yeah, because this came out in 2008. Well, the series and Glee came out in 2009.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
But that's one of the interesting things about going through Fear Itself so far is, like, compared to Masters of Horror, which has a lot of the same actors you see in a lot of horror films and that, but Fear Itself, which is particularly interesting, is that there's a lot of actors who appear throughout all these episodes that would started out in these episodes and would go on to have huge careers later on.
That's so insane.
Oh, yeah. And I also think it's interesting that this episode was written by the writer who created the comic book series 30 Days of Night as well. So I think that's...
I didn't realize that, actually.
Yeah, Steve Niles, yeah.
Yeah, and Ben Sokolowski did Arrow. He worked on Arrow, which I thought was really cool. I loved the Arrow first couple of seasons, so...
I also think another thing I really like about, because like I said, like, this is definitely a Darren Bousman episode through and through, but one of the things I really like in terms of what he brings with his style and direction is when he does go to the flashbacks, when we go to the New Year's Eve party, like, the transitions were really cool.
That was really good, yeah.
Like, Briana Evigan's character, I believe her character's name is Helen. Like, she'd be at the car park, and then all of a sudden the camera would zoom back, and then you would see, like, cups and everything, like, in the foreground. And then camera moves around, and then we're at the party. And all those, and again, those are, like, something out of the Saw films as well, in terms of those transition shots.
Yeah. And especially because when he does transition from those, the present to the past, we see that real difference in depth and intensity of colors and vibrancy. So you're like, okay, this is definitely a flashback because the present is really dull and what the hell's going on. And I really liked that. Because he does do that in Saw as well, when we see their different interactions with people in their past that got them, to where they are.
And I gotta say, there's one, like, watching this episode again, I picked up a massive plot hole. Where did the roommate come from when she actually went over to her boyfriend and her boyfriend's house?
It's not her boyfriend
the whole time.
Sorry?
He stalks her the whole night, but Cory Monteith isn't her boyfriend. She's just in love with him.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, good. Yeah. I stand corrected. But, yeah, she goes over to the house, goes through the door. Yeah, because then she sees her friend who's sleeping with the
boy that she's in love with.
I feel like they must have dated or were dating very briefly.
Yeah.
Just wasn't that into her. and he started banging the friend behind her back.
Yeah.
And she was oblivious to it. That's what I think was going on. And the housemate was really in love with her, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think he was following her the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he was following her the entire time because, he probably was going through the same type of thing himself and still being in love with her. Hence, like, at the very end, they hold hands and chow down on Cory, Monteith, and their other friend. But the plot hole I have is, Helen comes in through the door, sees Cory, Monteith, and Zulay Henao, who plays Christy. And then all of a sudden, like, her roommate is in the kitchen. He grabs Cory Monteith, and I'm like, where did he come from?
How did you get in the house? Did someone leave a door open?
Well, maybe they were too distracted by Helen that they didn't see him come in.
But the thing is,
that's what I'd assume. I don't know.
I guess, but the geography, because the kitchen is not anywhere near the front door. You have to go through the front door and walk around.
Maybe he crawled in, Bede. Maybe he crawled in.
Crawled in under the camera.
Yeah.
Well, I was the same, like, with that kid who was introduced earlier and then comes back as a zombie. It's like, and then he's in the house, but the dude shut the door behind him.
Who does the kid belong to?
These are all questions.
Maybe it's that lady across the road who was a zombie.
Oh, that is true. Yeah, that could be a good point. I
don't know.
I don't know, because I know that the housemate says, "I can hear your mum calling you. Have a good night."
Oh, so she'd have to be, like, at least on the same floor as Helen.
Okay, I'm just like, the kid was unnecessary.
Yeah, it was like you could have taken the kid out and it would not have affected.
I would not even notice.
But I guess we could wrap up this our talk on New Year's Day. Marcey, tell us your final thoughts and rating for this episode.
Yeah, this is definitely a case of overly stylized more than substance. I think it just went a little too over the top with that. And for me, that was quite distracting. I think there's a very solid and intriguing premise that makes for, an interesting watch. But, at least for me, it was quite predictable with where it was going. But I give this 2.5 zombie boyfriends out of 5.
And what about you, Kat?
I agree with Marcey on the over-stylized, only because, like, I'm really light sensitive, and so that was a little bit annoying for me because I couldn't concentrate on any dialogue, and I was like, ugh. But yeah, I loved the premise. I loved the whole concept of her retaining some kind of her humanity while she's on this journey to find the love of her life in this zombie apocalypse. But yeah, I give this a 3.
Yeah, I would.
Zombie revenge. Just out of 5.
I give this one 3 out of 5 step-ups to the streets. Or, in this case, zombie step-ups to the streets.
See, where's that movie musical?
Where is that movie?
See, I want to see a zombie dance film now.
Oh my god, let's make one.
Let's do this. But yes, I give it about 3 out of 5. Like I said, this is definitely an episode where it is more style over substance, overly styled, as I've already stated before. But I do think it has a lot of merit, and I think out of all the episodes of Fear Itself, at least from what I remember, and as well as, going through this retrospective up to this point, this is definitely the one where you can honestly say that this is definitely was made by the filmmaker who's directing it. Like, his style and his trademarks to shine through. I would say this, and also the Ronnie Yu episode that we talked about on the previous episode, our family member, are definitely the best indicators of that. And also I thought Briana Evigan, like, even though, Helen does make some pretty dumb decisions, but, there's a logical explanation why that is. But I thought she still did a pretty good job, and, she goes through a lot in this episode. And I felt like the episode did a pretty interesting job in which kind of doing something different with the zombie genre, kind of making a point of view of somebody who's turning into a zombie as this whole thing is happening.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed that aspect.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a pretty decent episode. So yeah, 3 out of 5.
Actually, one thing I will add, I thought, because we could tell, the budget was a lot less than Masters of Horror was, but this episode actually didn't look too low budgety. compared to a couple of the other episodes. So I thought that actually worked in its favor as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think because Darren Lynn Bousman, having done the Saw films, which were also budget films, he knows like how to make something very cinematic out of something that's very low budget. So that would make him sort of like the kind of the right filmmaker for an episode like this as well. But yes, well, I guess that could be a wrap on this episode of Podcasters of Horror. Thank you, Marcey, as being a great co-host as always.
You're welcome.
And also thank you, Kat, for coming on this episode and talking about these 2 episodes from the show with us. And hopefully, based on these 2 episodes, it'll make you interested to check out more of this series.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm going to probably chuck on an episode before I go to bed because horror is comfort. So I'll just watch that before bed.
We would say, Marcey and I would say, watch the episode Spooked, which is directed by Brad Anderson, mainly because it stars Eric Roberts, and we love Eric Roberts.
And then the one after that as well, Family Man, wasn't it?
Yeah, by Ronnie Yu. Right. So. But also do check out other episodes of Masters of Horror, because there's a lot of great ones there too. So, but yes, so Marcey, where can people find us on the internet this week?
Yes, as always, because we are the Super Network and we have many podcasts and stuff under our banner, our base of operations is supermarcey.com, and you can always keep up to date with us on your preferred social media platform of choice. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/the Super Network. You can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/the Super Network group. You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/SM_Super Network. We are on Instagram, the.super.network, and on TikTok at the Super Network. And you can find us on YouTube with all sorts of bonus stuff. Just look up the Super Network YouTube channel or Super Marcey or Bede. You'll find the channel there. And you can follow me on Twitter under my personal account at twitter.com/supermarcey. And you can find me on Letterboxd at super_Marcey, and you can see all the stuff that I check out. And of course, when I watch episodes of Fear Itself, I log them on there, and I have my rankings list of all the Masters of Horror episodes, which I'll probably do the same for this one when we finish it.
Awesome. Awesome. And if people want to find me personally, they can find me at my Twitter page at twitter.com/BJermyn, or my personal writers page on Facebook at facebook.com/terribleaussie. And of course, you can find all my writings over at supermarcey.com with my reviews and columns. And also definitely go check out my Twitter, because at the time that this episode drops, I'll already be neck deep into my 31 days of horror. So you'll be able to see all my Twitter reviews and reactions to all the films I've been watching so far in October. And Kat, where can people find you on the internet this week?
I shitpost on Twitter at twitter.com/catstead_, and that's basically the only platform I ever use.
But where can people find your awesome podcast?
Yeah, so you can find the podcast on Twitter at TGIF podcast_. All our updates, news, and whatnot come through there. Or you can find, well, I have an Instagram. It's Cat TGIF, and I also post episode information and horror-related stuff on there as well.
Awesome. And yep, that's a wrap on this episode of Podcasters of Horror.
Yes.
Keep a lookout next month for our next episode, in which I will do an episode on the next 2 episodes of Fear Itself, which of course are Community and Skin and Bones. However, though, just a bit of a precursor, we also have a special bonus episode of Podcasters coming up as well that Marcey and I are working on. We won't say what that episode's about, but let's just say we're going to be talking about a couple of episodes from a very underrated but still classic 80s horror anthology TV show. No, it's not Tales from the Crypt. That's but it's something else. So, right, Marcey?
Yes. Don't give it away now, Bede.
I'm not going to give it away, but I'm dish. But yep, thank you to all our listeners for listening to this episode of the podcast, and we'll see you all later. See you, everybody. Bye.